This Boostcast discusses how to adapt when you are isolated, and we're doing so with three amazing people. Bill Tommy was chief executive of a business and father of two daughters, was running on Snowdon and had a brain hemorrhage which changed his life. Marc Stabina, a professional rugby player, broke his neck playing in France and had to change his career. And Bep Dhaliwal, who'd only just helped her husband over lymphoma, discovered that she had cancer herself. Stick with us to the end, there's some real moments of magic.
The author, Viktor Frankl, wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book, he describes the stimulus and the response. And between those two things, there's a space. The good news is that we're in control of that space. And today we're going to talk about how do you adapt to isolation. I'm delighted to have my crew back in Marc, Bep, and in Bill. And I thought we'd start by just doing just explaining a little bit about what isolation might mean, a definition, if you like. And it could be physical. So isolation could be, I'm in a place I did not choose. And it could be, I feel alone. So if we use that as a working definition, I've written down a list, which I'd love my colleagues to build on, of people who might be feeling isolated right now. NHS workers, single parents, a grandparent who can't be hugged, a teenager, pensioners, sports people, company bosses, salespeople, police officers, exam students. Are there any I've missed?
Well, I suppose I can jump in with a few that I'm aware of at the moment, which are some mums that are in maternity wards right now as we speak, having to have babies quite often on their own, a time when it should be full of joy is full of a lot of angst and worry.
Yeah, and Marc, transport workers is a big one for me. Public transport, commercial airlines, a lot of them have been reduced, but there's still, in many cases, business as usual. So, you know, there are bus drivers and train drivers and pilots and flight attendants operating near empty transport right now.
Marc, I'd like to throw in teachers. I don't know if they're on your list. My wife's a primary school teacher, and over the past few weeks, she's felt incredibly isolated as the only teacher in a full primary school teaching tiny, small groups of 6, 7, 8 kids of key workers and vulnerable kids. And so right across the globe, teachers have been asked to work in isolation and work through the standard holiday periods in order to support the current situation. So teachers are isolated, in my view.
Thank you. And what it triggered in my brain is that there will be other people listening into this that we haven't called out. And please do tell us. Please reach out to us in the comments and say, yeah, we are as well. Don't forget us. That would be hugely useful. So in the context of adapting to isolation, Bep, tell us a bit more about what you think.
Well, I suppose the other people that we really do need to call out in this instance right now is anybody that has COVID-19 or anyone who has been impacted by it.
Of course, yeah.
Because they are really in isolation. So either at home or in hospitals where they can't have their loved ones with them. And that is incredibly heartbreaking to hear some of the stories that we've heard right now. I suppose in terms of what isolation meant for me when I've been on my numerous cancer journeys, so not only me, but also as a carer actually, so for my parents, isolation is tough in terms of when you see the fear in your loved ones' faces. The hardest thing for me when I got diagnosed was actually telling my dad first time round, and seeing the pain in his face was incredibly heartbreaking. And I really felt that, you know, I mean, I felt a lot of guilt, and I've spoken to a lot of people at the moment who are, well, obviously, as we all are, working from home. And one of the common themes that is appearing again is guilt for the impact on not being able to do what you would normally do, the pain in, you know, your loved ones' faces, as I said. And isolation, I suppose, in terms of me, because of that fear that I saw in their faces, feeling that I couldn't share some of the pain, that I was going through. And again, for me, I suppose as a natural carer, I was more worried about what was going on for them than what was really going on for me. And at the time, I suppose I navigated it and had to take the time afterwards to think, what do I actually need? And how do you ask for the help that you need? And I that's been a big learning curve for me in terms of actually stopping and prioritizing and thinking about my needs. And I think this isolation element is an opportunity for us all to stop and think about what it is that we need and how others can help and reach out for that help, because there is a lot of help available, but having the courage to think about that and reach out for it, I think, is really important at a time of isolation. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Mark.
This Mark or the other Mark? Because I definitely have thoughts. I mean, that made me think of my situation, and I was going to ask you. What I'm hearing is that there's, even though you have people around you, I mean, you shouldn't, I shouldn't say shouldn't, but one would think that if you've got a support structure around you, that would help you not feel isolated. But it's the fact, it's that we impose it on ourselves sometimes because we isolate ourselves, and by choice in a way, because maybe we don't, and we make assumptions. And that resonated for me because I've already mentioned when I had my injury and my career had finished, even though I was still very much part of a team and everybody said they would support me and I had a flood of well wishes and love and people reaching out, I didn't feel like, I isolated myself because I didn't feel that they could relate. I didn't feel part of it anymore. And I was so caught up in now what's next for me and the fear, and even going into victim mode and not being willing to be vulnerable and express to someone that I'm feeling isolated or I'm feeling scared, not wanting to impose it on other people. And in doing that, I isolate myself. So I just wanted to add to that. I have my experience with what you went through.
Yeah.
Mark, can I build on that a little bit? The thing about isolating yourself, I wholly relate. When I recovered from the brain trauma, and then I came to terms with the fact that I could no longer do and be the things I was used to being, my isolation was based on my need to keep on fixing everything, including myself. And the more that I couldn't fix me because I was so incredibly broken, and I didn't have the toolkit for that. So the harder I tried, the worse I did, the further I regressed into my own place, because I didn't know where to go for help, even though it was right in front of me. But because I was so used to as a person, and I guess Bep and Mark, you guys, you were what you were before your illnesses and your traumas. What I was the guy that always did. And suddenly I'm the guy that had to ask for help and could do all but nothing, including remember my own kids' names.
And so, Phil, I've got to stop you now, because there'll be people watching and listening to this, but the watchers mainly, that look at you and say, hold on a second, we've got you on a beach now. The backdrop is a beach and you're wearing sunglasses. Can you help us understand why you're wearing sunglasses?
Yeah, without wishing to make a big deal of it, I suffered a brain hemorrhage, and then once I got back on my feet, I managed to then get a stroke, which frankly blinded me. And it took the majority, but not all of my sight. So I shouldn't, loosely speaking, medically speaking, I shouldn't use the term blindness, but I was left blind. So I've lost 100% use of my perfect eye and reduced use of my other eye. And the glasses aren't because of the beach. The glasses are because I'm now hypersensitive to sunlight. So my isolation was based on the fact that one day I went to work, and then by lunchtime I was in Derby General Hospital, big shout out to Derby, who miraculously tried to save my eyesight and couldn't. And I came home blind 16 days later. And so I was literally isolated in a world of couldn't see very well. And I just went backwards on that. So my isolation was both mental and my senses had gone. So my sensory isolation was fairly horrific, but mentally was the big challenge I had.
And
So that was my problem with isolation.
how did you get to any kind of adaptation? Because we said adapting to it. How on earth did you adapt?
I've got what is now a funny story, but it was a story that left me crying in tears. And I tell you about that because I want everyone to realise you can have a defining moment and then you will adapt because we're survivors. I spent a period of time trying to continue being me, and unbeknownst to myself, one of the significant challenges of losing eyesight is working with warm food substances. So I continue to try and make myself coffees, which resulted in burned feet because I was pouring boiling water into a cup down a surface. I was then stood in a puddle of my own boiling water.
Bill, we're smiling, by the way. I'm not sure that's appropriate, but
and in the end, it was my daughter just said, "Why don't you just let us make you a cup of coffee, Dad?" And it was that simple moment of you're not so isolated, you're not so on your own, that your own family. I was missing the fact that my own family were desperate to help me out of isolation. They'd watch me go into my cave, and then they were desperate to come and say, "Can we take your hand, Dad, and walk you back out?" And I needed to burn my feet a few times for me to say, I can't keep doing this. And a moment of adopting and adapting had begun.
And building on that, I just think what I'm really hearing really clearly, I think from both of you guys, is that your identities were totally changed. And the impact of having a very different identity is the bit that, you know, we all need to think about, that these life-defining events have made us different people. We maybe brought out some elements of us that might have been buried that we didn't even know we had in these moments. I don't know what you guys think about the whole identity piece.
Oh, 100%, Bep. That's, like I said before, I was part of a rugby team. In many ways, we consider ourselves a family, and we sacrifice for each other, and we ride that wave together. We ride the highs and the lows, and we bond very much over the competition, the triumphs, the defeats, and we go through that together. Now, all of a sudden, I'm faced with, okay, yeah, I can catch up with any of them for lunch right now, but I'm not there anymore. And I can't relate to that anymore. I can't. That was my identity, and now we talked about denial a lot last week. I was almost in denial about moving forward. This could quite possibly, I'll never have that feeling again. I'll never bond with them on that level again. And I internalized that, and I put my feeling on it, meaning and emotion to it, and a fairly uneducated lack of emotional intelligence. We talk about that again, and that caused me to feel more isolated. When now, 10 years later, having learned what I've learned and gone on the journey, if I look back, I would have dealt with that way differently and probably a lot better. Good news is, everything we're going through now, I'm better equipped, and I'm also better equipped to educate and support others in going through the same thing.
What I find remarkable about that, Mark, as a sportsman, I can relate, not at the level you played, but what I learned was I was also on a team when I lost my eyesight. Some people call it a family, and I completely overlooked the fact that I didn't have to be all things to all people and the only player in the game. And it was okay for me not to be the dad who had all the answers. It was okay for me not to be the big, tough, strong guy. All that was okay. It was all right to let my daughter kind of shave my beard. It was okay to do that stuff. We just had to learn how to play in the game different. And I completely missed that. When you're talking about being in a team and that team bonding, I absolutely relate to that. But actually, I'd forgotten to do that within my own family. I was all things my family. And I had a perfectly wonderful set of kids and a wife who were just waiting to dip in and do it with me. And I had to find a moment to let them.
Bep, you said this last time. You said that the hardest thing was talking about this with the people closest to you. And until you accepted, was it vulnerability, I think we talked about, then you would never ask for help. I've got to solve this myself.
Yeah. And I've always been, I'm the big sister in our family. I'm the eldest cousin on one side, and I've always been the one that just supports and encourages. And actually I saw the impact on my family, so alluding to that piece that I did as well earlier, but when they look at me and they see that I might not quite be able to be the one to lead right now, you can see the fear in their faces as well. But allowing, and that's why I had to seek my support sometimes in other places, and loads of other people rose to the occasion that I hadn't anticipated. Some people withdrew because they weren't able to face seeing, Bep in a vulnerable way. And it hurt at the time, I'm not going to lie. And I was just dumbfounded because I was like, I'm still me. I was clinging again onto that identity, even though I looked different. My hair was shorter. When I went back to work, it was challenging because, again, I thought work was my safe space where people knew me as Bep. They didn't need to know me as Bep who had cancer. And I was stunned by the reactions that I got. And it's only now in hindsight, as I've processed a lot of what it means. And that, again, was really isolating. So another example of going back into an environment that is really comfortable and it's where you can be who you are, but you're not received in the way that you were before. And I find it really hard to ask for help even up to now. And I've had a lot of line managers in particular that have said to me, if only you could just relax and, and allow us to help you. But I'm a real firm believer that you hear the message when you're ready to hear it. And I'm a real, when the time is right, we will do what we need to do. And it's a massive learning curve until then. And I really want to just make people aware that none of us know how to deal with this current situation that we're in. It is incredibly isolating on so many different levels, but know that nobody knows, and there is no right way or there is no wrong way. And, like I said before, we're all unique. We're all going to manage it in our own way, but don't be afraid to ask for help, or don't be afraid to reach out and say the emotions that you're feeling, because they are all so valid.
I think, just that thing, Bep, one of the things I realised as well was that because of what we think the world thinks of us, a bit like you were just saying, Bep, that you were the carer and you were a strong cousin within the family unit, etc., etc. What I also realised was that because I was who I was in the eyes of the world, I actually had to go through a process of helping them not be scared to help me. I'll give you a silly little example of that. One of my rugby mates from my rugby club, who's been a pal of mine 25 years, I was really kind of disappointed that for 4 or 5 weeks after I lost my eyesight, he didn't come near. And eventually he did, bullied by his wife. And he came in and his exact words to me were, let me just look at you quickly and then I'll be able to talk. And what he was saying to me was he couldn't cope because he thought I was going to have a cosmetically damaged face. It was his fear of what I had become that was inhibiting him, and it was inhibiting me. So we had to work together to let him help me. Now, some people might say, well, that was his issue. I think that we also need to let people know it's okay to step into your isolated world and start to help you come out of it. And so this guy literally said, go on then, pop your glasses off. And I had to show him I had a couple of eyes that were still all right to look at. They just didn't work anymore. So there is a bit around how we manage the environment into which we've isolated ourselves to let people come in and walk us out, if that makes some sense. That's what worked for me.
Yeah. One thing that was going to come to you, Mark, in a sec. One thing you triggered in my brain, Bep, was we have a mutual friend in Tabitha Bevan. And I was talking to Tabitha earlier today, and she said she's been reflecting. She's been unbelievably busy because she's been doing remote singing choirs with everybody. And she said, I've just made a decision this morning just to stop doing stuff.
Yeah.
She said, we've never had a better opportunity to just relax. And we're overthinking and overdoing. And
and overcommitting to what we think we should be doing. This whole word should that keeps on coming into everybody's vocab. Honestly, I am really at peace with sitting in my garden and actually just being for a little while and recharging. We're never going to get this time again, really, unless we allow ourselves to have this time to recharge. And isolation for me has actually been a gift. I didn't realize how much I needed to have some time out.
Opportunity.
Mark, I'm desperately going to come to you now, because we're talking about the garden here. In the UK, our weather is stunning, and I believe it's raining in LA.
Clearly, look at, I want to be where Bill is right now. Where is that Birmingham, North Wales?
Yeah, this is just north of Birmingham. This is one of the best weathered counties in the whole of the United Kingdom. Staffordshire. Yeah, Staffordshire Beach.
Yeah, and there's not a breath of wind. I mean, the clouds haven't even moved at all. I love it there. I'm on the next plane as soon as I'm allowed.
I'm not sure what you're suggesting. I'm not sure at all.
Mark, you had a question for me? I mean, I've got so many things swimming around with what Bep and Bill are saying, and I don't even know what to touch on, but maybe I'll answer a question that you have.
Yeah, here you go. It's what was the switch that made you go, okay, I'm adapting to this situation. That space that Frankl talks about, I've got it now, and I'm ready to go. What was the switch that helped you adapt to isolation and actually come out of it?
Yeah, I say this a lot to people, and I mentioned it in part one of this podcast, was reading that book. It was a switch for me. And it was called The Power of Now. It just really landed for me because it pulled me out of what I was creating for myself right then. And that was self-isolation. That was panic. That was fear. That was worried about the next step. That was worried about losing my identity. We keep mentioning identity, and I have a few comments about that because we tend to cling on to that. And what I learned from that book was, again, just to get in touch with how my thoughts, I generate my own thoughts and establish a better relationship with my image and my ego that I put so much weight on, or my ego wants to put me in these situations where I feel isolated. So it wasn't necessarily a switch that everything changed, but that certainly was a catalyst for further exploration. And I'll say it again, it's just looking inward and doing your best to be comfortable and accept, first of all, yourself, accept that this is part of being human, and then accept the circumstances. Easier said than done. But you do have a choice. And going back to what you said, Mark, that's the gap. That's the gap. Sometimes we just want to react straight away based on our emotions, and that can dig us into a further hole. Or we can just sit and look at who we are and then notice our emotions. Bill said it before, and it's okay if I'm feeling scared. Same with Bep. If I'm feeling scared and I'm lacking identity and I'm worried what people are thinking of me, just notice it. And just like the clouds in Bill's background, that you can imagine that your emotions are clouds, and that they'll just pass, and observe them as they pass. But don't make that who you are, which is what I was doing. Mm-hmm. I was making I am fear, I am worry, I am less than now because I'm not a rugby player anymore. Rather than what I've learned today is that's how I'm feeling. That's not who I am, and that'll move by and allow me to then respond.
Wow. So the emotion is not the identity, which is the point I'm hearing. There's something I do want to call out to anyone who's watching. The three people on the call with us are people who are wonderful, positive energy bringers. All three of you are in that state where it's go forward, solve, positivity. But where I think there's so much value in hearing your stories is the dip that came after the trauma. And in fact, more than one trauma. Bill, you had that follow-up that then affected your eyes.
Yeah.
Bep, you are still and only just come out of chemotherapy, and yet all three of you are in this can-do, positive, energizing, because you bring an energy that energizes me. So, Bep, goodness me, how do you do that? How do you bring can-do, a feeling that you're in control, that, yeah, how do you do that?
Okay. I'm just going to correct you on the treatment I've just finished is radiotherapy. So I've still got my own hair. Otherwise, I would be looking very different.
That's my next question, Bep.
No, so radiotherapy. So for me, and this has been a bit of a practice in terms of other life events that have happened at various different times, that I really choose my attitude. I've had to take a lot of time to think about acknowledging the emotions that are uncomfortable for me and for others, but know that they have a valid place to be, and I literally work through them, like the guys have said, like Mark said. It is an emotion, it's here to tell me something, I need to let it pass through. But people do call me the queen of silver lining. I can find a silver lining to everything, and but in a good way, not in a false way. So for me, I really want to acknowledge the emotions that, like I said, are uncomfortable, but find my own way through, because every single one of my life events, and they, like I said, have been quite a few, not just cancer, have taught me something. And it was only when a friend of mine said to me, because cancer, especially in the Asian culture in particular, you'd think it was contagious, the way people don't want to talk about it. And there is a lot of work being done at the moment where we are trying to open that dialogue up a little bit. And I'm a real keen advocate, not only for being, a cancer patient, but also I've been a carer. And I just think there is so much support that's required, but with the power of vulnerability helping people through this. And so for me, it's a case of when one of my friends said to me after my first cancer journey, I was shying away again and nervous about going back to work, and she said to me, well, what if you could actually help people by sharing your story? And that just turned everything on its head for me. And I just thought, gosh, if I can help people, then I am all over this, and give me a microphone and I am there. And so I just, for me now, when I see it as a service, that is how I think I've managed to switch from, not being the victim so much, but the person that got cancer, like, oh my God, how scary is that? But to the person that has had it and has come out the other side. And I know how blessed I am to have come out the other side, but to now open up and share what it means to be on that journey, and just help as many people to move from the fear to the elements that you can control. It always comes back to that stimulus response piece. How can I proactively move forward from this?
But can I have a little extension on that?
Yeah,
you
sure.
mentioned that cancer within your culture was an inhibiting factor to some degree on what we could do. And amazingly, it never struck me until 10 seconds. You just gave me a moment of education. I went into the depths of depression, and anybody that knows me knows that's not where you'd expect to find me. And I'm going to call it out now. On 2 occasions over the last 24 months, I've considered ending my own life. Not because I was being a victim, but because I was choosing at that point not to deal with the consequences of my blindness. I didn't want to never drive again, not ride my motorbike, not play golf, and do all the things my kids down the aisle. So I was going to quit. And I realised why I hid it just in this instant. My culture, I come from an incredibly hard, poor, working class Glasgow culture. I'm not allowed to be depressed. I'm not allowed to quit. I'm not allowed to cry. So I had to walk into the darkness of the local woods to do all that stuff, because in my head I wasn't allowed. However, the thing that triggered me coming out of isolation was I parked for the first time in 55 years. I parked my culture, and I told some people that I was incredibly depressed and probably suicidal. I didn't know what that meant. But as soon as I said it, somebody found a magic spark that helped walk me tentatively out of my cave. And the other thing within culture, and it's just, sorry to major on culture, but I think this is dead important in getting out of this isolation fear, was that I had hidden the fact that for 50 years, I actually wanted to be a musician. And it was a pal of mine came around and said, now's your time to be something you've always wanted to be in an hour of darkness. And both my Glasgow working class roots didn't allow me to be depressed and didn't allow me to say I wanted to be a musician. And suddenly I had to get to the depths of despair to walk out the darkness. And it just absolutely made sense to me that you can come back for this stuff. You can absolutely be what you want to be. And you've got a choice, and you can fill the gap, and you can make some decisions. And you can say, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing the dark stuff. I don't know how, but I'm going to start the journey back. And I'm going to shake off some of my friends of reference and some of my anchors, and I'm going to be different. And we can come out of this very different. Coronavirus can have made you do some stuff incredibly good or incredibly bad. You could be the person who bought the toilet rolls or the person who looked after your neighbour. You've got the same choices in that gap that Mark mentioned. And so choosing what you're going to do in that gap is incredibly important, how you come out of isolation.
And I've got to call out as almost replaying what I've heard that it's really triggered for me. And as you said, Bill, I'm being educated by the discussion. One started by you, Mark, was recognize the emotion. And I do have the clouds in my mind. Recognize them, but do not associate them with your own identity. The negative ones, at least. That was huge for me. And then the second point is you can then choose something, right? You choose what you think and feel about it, and then make a choice. And what you said, Bep, about then share it. Have the presence and confidence to share it with people who care about you and who you care about, because that helps in the journey to the next stage of the process. So that's massive. And Bill, you inspired me to share someone who I worked with for 10 years, actually, who was amazing, bubbly, capable. She won Salesperson of the Year every year when I was working with her. She was an incredible human being, Wendy Hetherington, and she worked with Edwards Life Sciences, and we've mentioned Edwards before, fabulous business. And in 2017, Wendy took her own life. And you talked about thinking about that, Bill. I wanted to say that Wendy must have been in that context. We knew that she suffered from depression. She shared that. But you never understand that sense of isolation. You can be in a crowd and feel completely alone. And so you triggered that when you said you thought about those things yourself. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Mark, can I, again, just to bring that point home, because when you talk about the analogy, and this will be very helpful, I feel, for people listening and watching. Once again, let's take Bill's background. For me, in my analogy, Bill, as we all are, is the beautiful blue sky. Always. That's Bill. The clouds behind him are his emotions. Some of them nice and white and fluffy. And some of them very dark and grey and ominous and scary. But what's always there is the blue sky. So I just wanted to, and that helps me a lot. When Bill, myself, you, Mark, we are not the clouds. We are the blue sky. So knowing that that's always there and that the clouds will pass, and we actually have quite a bit of power over that as well. And I think if we just keep connecting to, and in a way, I think that's what Bill did when he acknowledged his love of music and wanting to be music. That's the authentic blue sky Bill just coming through and pushing those clouds away.
But it's incredibly important that we all individually believe those clouds will come. White clouds and dark clouds, they will come. It's called life, but they will absolutely blow away. And they'll go away. And the majority of the time, huge percentage of the time, bad stuff stops. Low feelings stop. Now, I'm not dismissing people who are clinically in a really difficult and low place. They need help and go and get help. But I've been there. I'm not talking as someone who bobbed around for it. I've been there. We've been there. It goes away. All I would say to anybody is hang on long enough. It'll go away. Hang on long enough.
Stay resilient.
hope, the word hope, hold on, pain ends, HOP, it goes away. Just hold on long enough, it'll go away. And we'll come out of isolation. Coronavirus will go away. We will be back in the pubs, in the parks, in the places you want to be, doing the things you want to do soon. Just hold on a little bit. The clouds will blow.
Thank you. A lovely analogy that you've created there, Mark, about we're the blue sky and the clouds will come and go. Absolutely fabulous for me.
I'm going to steal it.
We will be using it. A couple of things for me to say, and I'd love to get final thoughts in terms of if there's a final tip. Bill, you've just given a brilliant one. Bep and Mark, I'm going to come to you. What's your final tip in terms of conquering or adapting to isolation? What would you say?
So for me, it is just, this is a really incredible opportunity to just spend some time with yourself. I think another element of isolation that we look to because we think it's our connection with others, but actually a lot of it does boil down to our connection with ourselves. And we have got a really important opportunity right now to just spend some time getting to know ourselves. And the biggest part for me around resilience and navigating uncertainty in uncertain times is actually just being kind to yourself, asking for that. I just think it's such an important part of this. Now's the time to think, actually, I really just want to do this for myself and take the time to build that relationship with yourself. It's really, really important, I think, on resilience and just navigating difficult times.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, thanks, Mark. I think this conversation is wonderful for people to use in really looking at isolation and seeing their own place in that. And am I self-isolating? Am I not reaching out to people? Do I really not have a support network, or am I choosing not to either reach out to the one that I have that's existing or create a new one for ourselves?
So, Mark, I'm isolating without the government telling me to, right? I'm self-isolating by some weird choice.
Yes. Yeah. So that's what I would say. Use this, like Bep said, reflect inward, be with yourself, and then whatever comes up, allow it, accept it, and don't get weakness and strength mixed up. And this is for the men especially. Bill and I touched on it. Don't mistake, it's time for resilience. It's time to get through, particularly people that feel they're providing for their own family and they need to be the leader and step up, and they're scared and they're worried about, and they're judging themselves for that. So weakness, you might feel, is reaching out and asking for help when it's actually strength. So find your strength right now and look for that support structure and tap into it.
Thank you. Final comments from me. There's a couple of things I want to call out. If you'd like to hear Bep speak, she's on May the 6th. She's with the Sister Network, an amazing group of women.
Good pitch.
May the 6th, look out for Sister Network. If you Google that, you'll be able to listen to Bep again. And I'm part of a group that's amazing called Mad World, and it's about mental health. I'm a massive believer in supporting Mad World. I got their newsletter today, and in it, it called out for people who are vulnerable and for emergency workers. There is a new startup company called Berry as in strawberry, Berry, and they are offering support and membership for free for emergency workers and vulnerable people. So if that might be you, then reach out to Berry and they can help. So thank you all for being on this Boostcast. It was extraordinary. Thank you.